Number 1.
Not too long ago, I was a 17-year-old college freshman in Tucson, Arizona. I lived right next to 4th Avenue and Main Gate Square, which is pretty sketchy during non-party hours. As I had moved there from the East Coast and was still adapting to the time change, I would sometimes wake up very early and go walking down 4th and around the area. Being young and naive, I figured it was okay even though the area was full of bums and druggies. One morning, soon after sunrise, I had gone on one of my walks and was heading back to my dorm when a homeless guy called to me from behind a wall, saying someone had stolen his suitcase. Being a complete idiot, I went behind there to talk to him and try to help. He immediately told me I was beautiful, swept in, grabbed my hand, kissed it, and wouldn't let go. Starting to get scared, I told him I had to go, pulled my hand away, and started walking off. Quickly, he pulled a glass bottle out from behind him and walked up behind me, saying he would walk me home. As I much preferred not to have the crazy hobo with the broken glass bottle behind me and out of my sight, I agreed and began to walk, completely terrified by this point. I couldn't get away from him. If I walked faster, he would keep up. He kept walking with me, glass bottle in hand, and pointed at me, talking about himself, saying how pretty I was and how he was going to come and visit me at my dorm. By now, I was extremely terrified, and my mind was racing to think of a way to get away. We weren't near an emergency call button, I didn't have my phone on me, and there was no one else around. I just kept walking, trying to keep him engaged in the conversation and distracted, hoping to God I wouldn't feel the bottle being smashed over my head. He kept making little grabs at me as we walked, and I would step away quickly, hoping he didn't attack. The bottle was still pointed at me. Finally, I got to the edge of campus. I saw him lose his nerve a bit. A campus cop drove by, and I tried to signal to him that there is a guy following me and threatening me with a bottle. He looked a bit puzzled and drove on. The homeless guy then visibly brightened up when we were alone again. After a furtive glance around, he turned to me and let the glass bottle drop. I stepped back, sure he was about to attack, but totally paralyzed. Sure enough, he swooped in and grabbed me. As soon as I started to struggle, he bear hugged me, pinning my arms to my sides, and lifted me off the ground. I was frozen with terror, unable to talk or move, until after he mashed his mouth against mine, feeling his nasty breath wash over me as he started to kiss me, and feeling him scrabbling at my clothes, I knew exactly what he was going to do. I finally snapped and all hell broke loose. It was like all the fear I'd built up suddenly came out. I ripped my mouth away from his and began thrashing and just yelling, "No!" in a voice I didn't even think I could yell in. The sound was so shrill and primal and frightening that he let go and dumped me in a heap on the sidewalk. He picked up the bottle again.
"I'm sorry about that. I'll just walk you home now. I bet your friends will be glad to have me visit."
I started backing away. No, just don't touch me." He stopped short, probably afraid that I would scream again.
"I'll leave you alone if you promise to come visit me. Promise?"
I somehow promised, and he stood there staring at me and let me pass. Needless to say, I was done. I just ran onto campus and didn't stop until I keyed into my dorm. I didn't dare look back to see if he was following. I ran up the stairs to my room, where I started scraping up my mouth and face with soap and water while sobbing hysterically. I woke my roommate up, and after making sure I was fine, she yelled at me about what an idiot I was. Needless to say, that was the end of my early morning walks. I've never seen the guy again. It took a month before I would go anywhere alone, and a year before I went back to 4th Avenue.
Number 2.
This actually happened to me a few months ago, and quite honestly, it still gives me the creeps. Side note, I have never had this problem in my life with anyone that is homeless, and I hope this guy gets some serious help. My husband and I were on our way home. It was late and I just got off work. I decided to grab something to eat from a fast food joint, and we were in the drive-thru waiting to be next in line. I noticed from my window, the passenger side, a homeless man maybe 20 feet away. This man was very tattered and dirty in appearance and was just looking straight up at the sky and spinning around. I thought, okay, someone's high tonight. We pulled up in line, about one car away from the window, and suddenly the homeless man was outside our car window. He was 6 feet away, just staring at us. The man didn't move. He was so still I thought he was a wax figure. I didn't want to draw attention, so I quickly looked away and started talking to my husband while we waited. It was finally our turn in line. I handed my husband my card to pay for my meal when the homeless man knocked on my window. My husband and I just stared at each other, not knowing what to do. The man asked us in a husky voice if we could give him some money and a ride home. My husband told him that we didn't have any cash and that we couldn't give him a ride. The homeless man then stared at me, thinking I was going to give him a different answer, and then just walked off. The transaction was finally complete after what felt like ages. We drove out of the drive-thru, got onto the main road and hit a red light. I was taking a sip from my drink when, out of the corner of my eye, I saw the homeless man, and he was sprinting to our car. The light was still red. There were quite a few cars still driving, so we couldn't chance running it. He went for my door handle and was trying to open my side of the car. It was locked, luckily. The guy was angry, and he proceeded to scream because it wouldn't open. He was pounding on my window saying,
"I'm going to shoot you if you don't open this door."
And he was putting his hand in his jacket when the light turned green, and I frantically told my husband to drive. We sped out of there, parked at a bar close by our place, and decided to call the cops since this homeless man threatened to shoot us. I'm not sure what happened to him. I haven't seen him around that area since that night, but I hope he gets the help that he needs.
Number 3.
I'm 22, and this incident happened a year and a half ago. I had just moved into my first apartment and was in the process of moving in. The door that led into my apartment locks itself automatically when closed, so I was going to the entrance of the apartment complex to get my mail while talking on the phone with my boyfriend. I returned to my apartment and sat on the bed while opening the mail while using the phone. I then accidentally dropped the phone on the floor and it landed under the bed, so I had to lie on the floor and stretch for it. I saw something that caught my eye. There was someone under my bed. My eyes widened and I choked the urge to scream. The person under my bed was lying still with his back towards me and his head to his chest, so I couldn't see his face at all. And he didn't see me, so trying to be rational while so many thoughts rushed through my head, I picked up the phone, said, "Sorry, I dropped my phone. I'm just gonna take a shower and call you back." The bathroom is right by my bed, so I hastily walked in, quietly locked the door, turned the shower on, jumped out my window, and then called the police. They told me to wait nearby, but to go across the street and see if anyone comes out the door to the apartment complex. This was during the summer, and it was still light out. I placed myself across the street, hiding behind a car while watching my open bathroom window and the entry door. I called my boyfriend and he came to me just before the police. I gave them my keys and they went inside. Only moments later, 2 cops came out holding a thin and tired-looking man. His eyes looked crazy, but he didn't try to get away. The policeman that had stood beside me and comforted me while the other police searched through my house told me something that I will never forget. Apparently, the man stood outside my bathroom door with one of my kitchen knives waiting for me to come out. This man had somehow crept in my entry door while I was getting my mail and hid under the bed. The man that was trying to hurt me turned out to be a homeless man and was placed in a mental hospital. My boyfriend moved in with me the very next day. The police told me that what I did was truly amazing and rational. If I did scream, it could have ended really badly for me.
Number 4.
I used to reside in the city of Houston. I grew up in the suburbs but moved in a city as soon as I could get away from the strip malls and chain restaurants. I moved to Inner Loop, Houston, to a small, historic neighborhood, the Montrose District, which was mostly attractive to college students, artist types, young people, gays, etc. Montrose is pretty socially liberal and probably the most out there Houston neighborhood, culturally speaking. Lots of cool, antique rental properties and garden apartments for singles and couples in their 20s, but not the kind of area that most people can afford to purchase a house or have the space for a family. I was very young when I first moved to Montrose, so I ate it up. The dive bars, restaurants, music clubs, coffee shops, street fests, proximity to the museum district, it was great, but every pro has its con. Montrose wasn't super scary crime-ridden or anything, or at least I never felt unsafe there, but it was a little rough around the edges. Drugs were easy to come by, and car break-ins were relatively common. There was a decent-sized homeless population to be berated by. Don't get me wrong, many of them were perfectly polite and harmless people, but there were a good handful that were bold, shameless, and persistent. While muggings weren't the norm, it was definitely important to be aware of your surroundings if you are out and about, especially if you are alone or it was after dark. So, one morning, about 8 AM, I'm heading to work. I stop off at the drugstore on the corner next to my apartment to grab a juice and some cigarettes before I hit the bulk of my commute. There's typically at least one homeless guy hanging out in this particular pharmacy's lot at any given time. But it's not worrying, they're usually passed out and no trouble, just resting in the shade under the structure away from the hot sun. As I'm walking in, I see a grizzled, white homeless dude wandering around the far end of the parking lot, quite a ways from me. It seemed weird, as they don't tend to panhandle here, and it's too boiling hot to be comfortable wandering around on the asphalt in direct sunlight. Additionally, I don't see any cars parked on his side of the lot, and no one's around for him to interact with, so his movements seem aimless and random. He sort of glances my way, but it's hard to tell from that distance if he's looking at me or not. From where I'm standing, it looks like his eyes are just randomly darting around, fixating on one point of the parking lot. Then, he quickly strides to that empty spot, and then he finds another spot a few feet away to look at, and then a skitter too. I don't feel threatened, but I'm definitely aware of his presence and questioning his stability. I make it into Walgreens undeterred, get my stuff, and wait in line to pay. I'm inside 2 to 3 minutes tops. I step out the exit and glance towards my car. I feel relieved when I don't see the guy on my end of the lot, so I start walking to my parking spot. I've made it maybe 5 to 10 feet from the store's exit when he appears seemingly out of nowhere and steps directly in front of me, blocking my path. He asks me if I have any money I could give him. He's older and pretty worse for wear. I feel bad for him, but I'm creeped out and in a hurry to get to work. I tell him what I often say to panhandlers, and it's usually true. Sorry, I don't carry cash. I step around him and keep walking, quickening my pace. I hear his footsteps following me just as quickly. From behind me, he demands,
I know you have change.
At this point, I'm rushing to the car, a hair away from breaking into a sprint. Sorry, I can't help you. I loudly respond, without so much as glancing back towards this guy who's still on my ass. I hit the unlock button on my keys and have my arm out, ready to reach for the door handle. My hand slides onto the handle, I yank my car door open and jump into the driver's side of my sedan. Before I'm even seated correctly, I immediately grasp out to unlock the door. Too late. This guy is now facing me, standing in the space between the open car door and me, blocking it from closing with his entire body. My car was just your standard 4 doors, so you can imagine I am now in an awfully close quarters with this guy. To make it even worse, he leans down so that his face is just about level with mine. His hair and beard are unkempt, his eyes are wild. As if I needed further confirmation, this is not a sane individual.
Give me all your money.
He didn't point any weapons, at least that I could see, or scream, or raise his voice. He just sternly said the words in a very matter-of-fact tone, as if this were the obvious directive and my compliance were given. I was terrified to say the least. I stared up at him for a second, not knowing what to do. In an instant, adrenaline slammed into me, and instead of immediately responding to his demand, I kept eye contact with him on my left side while my right hand shoved the key into the ignition and turned. No, was all I could squeak. And, ladies and gents, that was the day I ran over a hobo's foot. I would do it again too if I had to.
Number 5.
When I was 18, I lived in a young person's homeless hostel. To those of you who have never experienced one, they're basically all around the UK and are for 15 to 19-year-olds who had been made unintentionally homeless. In my case, my mother had moved abroad, and my father is useless. A quick brief history of the hostel may be useful here. Whilst I was living there were 6 of us in total, me being the oldest, and the youngest was a 15-year-old boy who was still in school. The building was a Victorian townhouse which consisted of 3 floors, 2 bedrooms to each floor, myself at the very top, and a basement to which the garden had been dug out around to house the kitchen, living room, and a small garden area. As this house was solely for young people, the building had CCTV and an 8-foot sealed wall around the back garden for extra safety. On to the story. One night, I was awoken at 2 a.m. to a knock on the door, which was common as I lived with 3 other girls at the time who wanted to borrow clothes, makeup, etc., so I didn't think too much of it. I opened the door to find it was the youngest resident of the hostel, looking clearly shaken. He explained that he was awoken by a loud banging coming from the window that overlooked the back garden, so I told him that we would both go and look together. As we got to the living room, it was clear that there was someone on the other side of the window. We sheepishly opened the curtains to find a man in his mid to late 20s, covered in blood, pushed against the window inside of our sealed garden. How he got inside the garden, I don't know. I remember the sheer look of relief on his face to see people were home. He kept begging us to let him in as he was being chased. I shouted through the window that he couldn't come in as it was a young person's hostel and everyone inside was under the age of 18, but he continued to beg. I was very concerned about the amount of blood he had on him and offered him to call an ambulance. This is when his face changed to a small smile and he very calmly told me,
Oh no, it's okay. This isn't my blood.
This is where we opted to phone the police instead. So, we phoned the police, they arrived, and by the time they arrived he was gone. You may be wondering whose blood it was. Well, I still don't know to this day. The police couldn't find him and told us that they would get back to us once they've got information, but haven't gotten back to us yet.
Number 6.
I lived in a small town in the downtown area in walking distance from a park where my mum sold food. There were a few homeless people who dwelled in the park where my mum vended food, so they would sometimes come up to her and she would give them a meal and a bottled water on the house. One homeless man, who was maybe a little more than tipsy, got upset and said,
I don't want food, I want money.
Or something along those lines, but he made it pretty clear that he wanted to buy some alcohol. She relayed the story onto my older brother and sister and of course myself. She said all that he had was a bike, a bottle and a sign reading that he was a war vet and needed cash. My mum had a very recognizable car. It was red and flashy, and she parked it outside of our house that was maybe a 2-minute walk from the park. One afternoon, I was in my room while my sister and brother were out in the living room. My mum had just left in her red flashy car, signalling everyone in town that didn't know that she had children that the house was empty. Anyway, I was folding laundry on my bed when my brother and sister rushed in the room and quietly but quickly shut the door behind them. I began to ask, "What are you doing?" but was interrupted with a panicked, "The homeless guy with the bike is here." I quietly got up from the bed and joined them at the bedroom door and listened to dead silence. A few seconds passed when the silence was disturbed by the creaking in the floorboards. We didn't even hear the front door open, just the sound of footsteps made, despite the intruder's attempts to be silent. I was just about done with this and quickly crept over to the window in the room. The screen on the window was bolted from the inside onto the frame, but I was not staying in this room without a lock on the door. I ripped the screen clean off, but it made a loud thunk sound. We all froze as the creaking sharply stopped. I opened the window and jumped out. I whispered up, "Stay here if you want, but I'm gonna go to the neighbor to call the police." I silently jogged around the house, peeking around the corner, and didn't see the bike or a homeless drunk. He must have fled, but we didn't hear him leave, which never sat well with me because I climbed out of that window pretty quickly after making the racket and looked down the long street both ways and saw nothing. It was like he wasn't there in the first place, but I'm damn sure that I heard someone lurking in the living room. My brother and sister saw him and described him to the police, and the description matched the very guy with the bike my mother had a quarrel with. To my knowledge, he was never found.
Number 7.
My New Year resolution 2012 was to get in shape again. After my first kid was born, I had lost my athletic interest, but I had every intention of getting it back. So I started running 4 days a week with my friend Hannah, who is a great runner and a motivator. We would run after work, 5 to 10 kilometers, usually favoring the forest trail. It's the kind of trail that got lighting in the darker months of the year, so you can run there any time really. Once you turn on the lights, you got 45 minutes to run the shorter trails, and longer to run the longer ones. Then the lights shut off automatically. We had been running for about 2 months when we started seeing the same man hanging around the parking lot every time we got there. Thin man, 25 to 30 years of age, always dressed in sports clothes, but never actually running. He never looked you in the eye either. We speculated that he could be homeless camping nearby because he was constantly there. We got used to seeing him sitting somewhere close by, silently and always on his own. We felt sorry for him. He never seemed to talk to anyone or interact at all, but there was something about him that made us hesitate to talk to him or ask if he was okay. I can't pinpoint what it was, but something just wasn't completely right with him. One evening, Hannah didn't make it to our run, and I decided to go on my own. I arrived at the parking lot, my car being the only car there. I did some stretching, turned on the lights, and set off on the 5-kilometer trail. I hadn't seen the thin, silent man when I started my run. Perhaps it was getting too cold to sit there now that it was autumn, dark, and getting closer to the freezing point. He must have been there though, somewhere in the shadows, because when I got to the top of the first steep hill, I could hear heavy breathing somewhere behind me. I look over my shoulder and see him. He is running like a man, obsessed, in regular shoes, not running shoes, with his arms moving in a really strange, stiff manner, as if he was made of metal, his hands like arrows, straight and in an upward/inward angle, sort of like a sprinter but more extreme, moving like a robot. For the first time, he looks at me straight in the eyes, and it was the eyes of a predatory animal, and it made my heart freeze. He had never done anything to harm me or anyone else as far as I knew, but the look in his eyes alone was enough to let me know that I was facing a serious threat. I started running faster, trying to create distance between me and the guy, and I could hear his heavy breathing getting even more strained. I ran like my life depended on it, adrenaline pumping through my body and giving me new strength. I tore off my necklace and threw it on the ground, thinking I must leave a trace if he takes me, something must be left behind. I tried screaming, hoping someone would be close enough to hear me, but I couldn't scream my lungs out and keep up the same pace at the same time. Why is he doing this? What does he want? And who is this guy? I thought to myself as I started to feel my lungs burn. Then I thought of my 15-month-old daughter and ran until I could taste blood in my mouth. He was still behind me, maybe 100 meters behind now, but I figured if I trip and fall or run out of energy or fumble with the car keys once I reach the parking lot, then I'm screwed. So, once I reached the sharp turn on the trail, I went off the trail and ran straight into the dark woods. I ran only a short distance, and then I laid down flat on my stomach, my hands searching for a rock to defend myself with if he found me. I then realized that I was wearing bright running clothes with reflexes and neon coloring. I had never felt so visible in the dark before. I could hear him reach the turn, and thank God, keep on running. I started to slowly and as silently as possible move further into the darkness. My heart sank again as I soon heard rapid footsteps closing in from the trail. He had realized that I must have gone off the trail once he saw that there was no sign of me ahead. He stopped, and I stopped. I could imagine him listening for any sound, and I held my breath and begged a God I didn't believe in to make him go away. After a while, I heard him say something in a language I didn't recognize and walk off. I didn't move. I feared that he would wait for me by the car and realized that I had to get off the trail and onto the main road and stop someone. I couldn't go back to the parking lot. I started to make my way further into the woods, knowing that I would eventually end up on the last part of the long trail and close to the main road. The lights on the trail suddenly shut off. That made me calmer at first. The dark was a comfort and protection. But then, after only a few moments, it switched on again. This could mean that another person had just started their run, and soon I would have someone there to help me, or that he was out looking for me, or getting ready to prey on another lonely runner. I decided against waiting to find out and continued my way towards the main road. It was dark and I fell multiple times, my clothes getting wet from the damp vegetation, and I started to get cold. After what felt like a lifetime, I could see the 10-kilometer trail ahead and knew I was close to the main road. Soon I could hear the traffic. Once I made it to the road, I must have looked like I've been in a terrible accident. Blood from several small cuts from the falling, my clothes dirty, and my face, I assume, petrified. My bright runner's shirt soon attracted the attention of a passing car. My waving and desperate shouting made it stop. The driver, a 40-ish man with his 2 kids in the backseat, spent the next 10 minutes or so trying to make sense of what I was trying to say between the sobbing and the crying. He asked me if I wanted a lift back to the parking lot, and I told him no. Please, just take me home instead. At home, my husband insisted on going to the parking lot to retrieve the car and calling the police. And report what? I asked. No crime had been committed. I just knew that he was out to get me. My husband went back for the car. The driver's seat window was smashed, and my phone was gone. So was the photo of my daughter that I had hanging from the mirror. I don't know what he was trying to do, or why he chased me the way he did, but the look in his eyes, there was no doubt that he had bad intentions.
Hey guys, it's the Grim Reader here. I hope you enjoyed listening through that. If you did, please slap a like, and if you haven't already, why not subscribe to be notified of future uploads? If you have a story you want me to narrate, please send it to my email in the description box. Once again, thanks a lot for listening.